What's going on, guys? My name is Jake, and welcome to Gax Reviews. So, obviously, I haven't really uploaded much aside from a couple of university projects I've done, but this is my channel. I love movies, and I figured I want a place to talk about it. So yeah, I'm basically starting off on my YouTube channel. So what you can see here is expect not right away, but in the coming days or coming months, I should say rather, I'll start uploading a bit more YouTube reviews. Obviously, I don't have much of a setup right now. I'm using this as my microphone. I used to do a YouTube channel back in the days from before high school. I had a bit more of a setup back then, but I don't as much anymore. So I'm kind of still readjusting back to this. So bear with me for the time being. But I thought, what better way to start off this channel than to do a Blu-ray / movie collection. So about a couple of years ago, I'd say about 3 years now, I started collecting movies, and it started off as a pretty minor collection until I got really obsessed with it. So I think I have over 130, 140 movies, and I figured, hey, might as well share them. So let's dive right into it. I got a couple DVDs in here, mostly Blu-rays and some 4Ks. I'm starting to future-proof my collection. So let's start off into the first one I have is actually Anchorman. So this, as a kid, introduced me to Will Ferrell's type of comedy. Will Ferrell is one of my favorite comedians, and his original movies that he made, Step Brothers and Anchorman, they're just hilarious. They're not everyone's cup of tea, obviously, but I really, really dig these movies. And yeah, so got this one on. I should probably upgrade this to Blu-ray sometime soon. But yeah, that's the first movie in the collection. Second off I've got is Apocalypse Now. I actually haven't seen this yet. It's been on my watch list forever. I've heard nothing but great things for it. So one day I'll get to this. I'm excited to get to that one. Next up I have is Arrival. Just a great science fiction movie. I think this is the first one I saw in theaters of Villeneuve's, actually. And such a good film at exploring a strong female protagonist as well as a morally compromised men. And it raises a lot of good questions about humanity, and one that I actually rewatched I think a year ago, and I want to watch it again. It's such a good movie. Next up I've got is Arrival. It's Avatar. So I was a kid when this came out first time. I never actually saw it in theaters, which I'm kind of bummed about because I never got to see the 3D. But yeah, as a special effects film on its own, gorgeous. It still holds up very well. However, the plot is kind of not great. Pretty basic, and it's just really long. So I haven't really gone back to watching this again. I don't really feel the need to, but whenever Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5 come out, I'm sure I'll give it another rewatch. But yeah, next up I have is The Avengers. I don't know what I can say about this aside from just childhood overblow, essentially. Like, I grew up on the MCU, so seeing these characters actually come and to a superhero movie that everyone thought was going to fail. No one thought this would work, and it did. And obviously it got a lot more crazy from this point on, but this is really when the MCU started to be taken a lot more seriously and became the global blockbuster phenomenon that it is today. So I'll always have this movie in a special place in my heart. Next up, Avengers Infinity War. I'm missing Age of Ultron because I don't like Age of Ultron, but Infinity War is my favorite of the MCU movies. Just what they were able to do with making a film that wasn't really about the heroes. It was more about Thanos, and you understood while you didn't agree with what he was doing. And just remember seeing this in the theaters for the first time, and that ending with the snap and how they actually did it and how they left it with such an ambiguous ending, even though you knew it was going to get fixed. Just something I haven't seen done in a blockbuster like this. Just so many fun theories that came out of this movie, and just the pacing, how the Russos were able to hold on that pacing for over 2.5 hours with all of these characters and make it work. Phenomenal movie. My favorite MCU movie. However, my second favorite MCU movie is Endgame. I don't think I've had an emotional reaction to a film like this. A lot funnier than I was expecting it to be, and yeah, sure, some things aren't perfect. It goes a little cliched towards the middle act, but if you're a fan of this MCU franchise, I don't see how anyone can possibly hate this movie. I really don't. It's just, saw it twice in 24 hours when it first came out. Just a great way to culminate the 21 film franchise that it was until obviously they continued it. But these characters that grew up loving Iron Man, great performance by Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, his ending to the film too is just a fantastic ending to this franchise, and one that I'm gonna can't believe exists, honestly. Next up we got is the Back to the Future trilogy. If I was to say one movie, if I could, out of all the movies I've seen, one would be my favorite, it is Back to the Future, the original. I've got a lot of memories growing up on this movie. I remember a lot of the Fridays, my family would have like a movie night. We would order pizza and we would watch a movie. We would go down to Blockbuster, rest in peace, Blockbuster. And we'd pick out a movie, and I would always pick Back to the Future. It's the perfect hybrid and blend of science fiction, comedy, and just such a fun story that really shouldn't work, especially when you look at the context of the movie with the incest angle and everything. But the performances in here and the score, the iconic score, that theme song is still one of my favorites of all time. And just everything about this movie is great. Now, the other two, Back to the Future Part 2 is still really good. I don't love it as much as the first one. And Part 3, I actually didn't see my childhood. I saw it, I think, when I was 14 for the first time, because we never could find it every time we tried to rent it. So I saw 1 and 2, and I always rewatched them. And the third's great. I really love the thirds, and I've seen it probably the least out of all of them. But the first I've had to see close to 30 times at this point, and I'm still not sick of it. I actually have a screening of this with a live orchestra coming up soon, and I can't wait for that. I'm so excited about that. Next up we got is Baby Driver. I like Edgar Wright's films for the most part. Baby Driver, I'd say, is probably one of his stronger ones. When I first saw this, the match on actions between the score and the sounds and how they match the actions of the characters, fantastic. I haven't rewatched this since it first came out, so it's probably due for a rewatch. I'm excited to give that one a rewatch. Next up we got is my actual first Criterion. It's the Before trilogy. So I actually haven't finished this series yet. I've watched the first two. I love Before Sunset. Before Sunset? Yeah, Before Sunset. I think it's probably my favorite one I've seen so far. I've heard Midnight's not as good, but still really good. Just a great trilogy of really down to earth humanity. I can't speak right now. Really down to earth films, with some two, like Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke are just incredible in this movie. My girlfriend actually hates Ethan Hawke, so every time I try to get her to watch these, she always has to tell me how much she hates Ethan Hawke's face. That's why we haven't watched the last one yet. I'm gonna get around to watching these and rewatch them soon. Just one of my favorite trilogies that I've seen so far. And that's the first stack of movies that I have. Next up that I've got is The Big Sick. Just a really nice, heartfelt comedy that really pushed Kumail Nanjiani into mainstream culture, and a really good underrated performance from Ray Romano. I always tell people that if they're not on the Ray Romano board, to give this one a try, because he blew me away when I first saw this, and he's actually one of my favorite actors at the moment, and he keeps popping up in movies that I really enjoy, and this is one of them. And if you haven't seen The Big Sick, go give it a watch. It's a very nice, easygoing rom-com with some hilarious jokes in here. There's one scene and one joke alone that every time I see it, I die laughing. And it's such a great, heartfelt movie. Next up we got is The Big Short. I've only seen this one once, for the first time last year, actually. It's got some really good performances in here. The story is very unconventional and kind of different for an Adam McKay movie, and that's kind of a vibe he's starting to move towards. And I don't think it would have worked without the people in the movie. Christian Bale's great in it, so is Steve Carell, and Ryan Gosling's really good as the narrator. I do have a couple problems with this movie, but I think it'll hold up better on a rewatch. You don't really understand and know what's going on, and I don't know if that's really a good thing or not, but this one's probably due for a rewatch sometime soon. Next up we got is Blade Runner 2049. I would say this is my favorite Villeneuve movie, but I haven't rewatched it yet. I, for some reason, have seen it first in the theaters and have not gotten back to watching it again. I really want to. I don't know what's holding me back from getting to it. I'm sure one of these days I will rewatch it. I just remember me being so blown away watching this movie, and I think actually this is the movie that made me consider putting film as my major in film or at school. It's such a slow and just methodically paced, brilliant film about what it means to be human. And Ryan Gosling, my favorite actor, Harrison Ford gives probably his best performance of the decade. It's just such a fantastic movie. Um, if you don't like slow science fiction, I'd still say give it a try, just for the name talent alone. And even Ana de Armas was probably her first mainstream role that she got. Um, Fantastic movie. This one I need to give a rewatch. Next up, we have one of my favorite movies of last year, of comedies at least, Booksmart. Olivia Wilde's coming of age movie just really blew me away for its mature look at these characters and just the way that they handle some of the situations they give, and in such a different way too. It takes risks, especially for a coming of age movie. I don't think I've seen a movie have a stop motion scene in the middle of it and work. It's great. And Caitlin Devers and I believe her name is Beanie Feldstein, right? Beanie Feldstein, fantastic. Caitlin Devers was actually one of my favorite performances of last year. I still think she probably should have been nominated for an Oscar, but Oscars don't really take these films very seriously. But I can't wait to see what Olivia Wilde does next. I'm such a fan of her directing after this. She's a great actress. She might be an even better director. Next up, classic, Breakfast Club. I don't have too much to say about this aside from this is the quintessential John Hughes movie for me. I've never really been a huge fan of John Hughes, but The Breakfast Club for me always stood out as my favorite of the bunch, and just such a chill and relaxing movie. Uh, yeah, I don't have much more to say about that. But next up, I got one of my favorite MCU movies, also aside from the two Avengers. This is probably my favorite standalone one, The Winter Soldier. I don't actually have the first Avenger. I thought I did, but I guess I don't. Um, I would say to me, this is the first Avengers or first MCU movie that really has its own kind of style and feel to it. The Russos, I think this was their first film that they made. They made Captain America cool. As the Avenger that I cared about the least going into the MCU, he was just made so, he was just characterized so well in this film. And Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow got a lot of depth to her. Um, and the story and relationship between Bucky and Steve fueled this movie. And I haven't seen this in a while. I've done it so much disjustice, but I love this movie. The twists and turns in it too. It's just a great spy film. Even if you don't love the MCU and you've seen a couple of them, I'd say give this one a shot if you haven't seen any of them. It feels the most different until we get into some of the later MCU movies like Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor Ragnarok. But this is the first early MCU movie that I still love to this day. Now, the next Captain America, Civil War. I don't really categorize this as a Captain America, even though it is Steve's story. It's basically Avengers 2.5, and I love this a lot more than I love Age of Ultron. And the introduction of Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, it just blew my mind when I first saw that. Yeah, it's great. The airport scene is still one of my favorite scenes in the MCU. I kind of wish the ending like punched a bit more than it did. I think they could have went a bit further than what they did, but I understand now with the culmination of Endgame why they didn't do what they did. But Civil War, still one of my favorite MCU movies. Next up we have is Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. So I actually watched this with my girlfriend for the first time, and I don't think either of us really knew what to expect from it. I was going through on a Kubrick binge because this is when I first joined, or when I first started film. I went through on a Kubrick binge, and I really have never seen any of his movies, but I've always heard about them as a film student. You're supposed to see all of them because, he's basically the godfather of film. And man, this movie, the more I thought about it and the more I just sat down and listened to that soundtrack, which I think is a top 5 soundtrack to me. Man, I still can't wrap my head around this movie completely. I need to give this one another watch in order to fully solidify my thoughts of it. But this probably could be a top 25 movie for me. It's that good. It's phenomenal. Speaking of phenomenal, Creed. Uh, Man, I never could get into the Rocky franchise. I think I saw about half of the first one. I haven't finished it yet. I'm planning on doing a rewatch of all of them in the future, but this movie, man, really brought Michael B. Jordan to the forefront for me. And Sylvester Stallone's performance in this is just so incredible. And talk about a brilliant way of continuing a franchise that doesn't feel forced. Great story, some great fight scenes in here. There's a one take scene that is incredible. And Please check this movie out. Just as good, not as good, but Creed 2. It's kind of falls a bit more cliche than the first movie. I find the first movie, it kind of takes a bit more risks. This is kind of more formulaic, but it doesn't take away from any of the enjoyment factor. There's still great performances in there, and they actually took one of the most comical characters in the Rocky franchise in that boy, and Dolph Lundgren made him pretty good. They made him kind of scary where he wasn't really in the fourth one. And yeah, Creed 2 is great. Please give me a Creed 3. I want that already. Next up, Batman Begins. I haven't seen this movie in a while. Christopher Nolan, Batman, it's fantastic. I think people underrate this a lot more than they should. I would say it's up there with The Dark Knight, probably. Like it's one of my favorite origin movies, that's for sure. And just Christian Bale's performance as Bruce Wayne and Batman, just phenomenal. I don't really have much more to say about that. On the same level, The Dark Knight. Yeah, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I've only actually seen it, I think, twice. And that's mainly because of this guy right here. His portrayal of Joker is so mind blowing. Like I haven't seen a character get lost in that before, and even as a kid watching this for the first time, just how menacing he was and how he got lost into this portrayal of this character, just phenomenal. It's a tragedy that we lost Heath Ledger, but we will always be remembered for this role, even though there was another Joker that did come out last year. I think he did so much for superheroes and so much for supervillains that just phenomenal movie. The Dark Knight Rises, it's okay. It's certainly not Nolan's best, and it's certainly not the best ending that it could have been for this movie. I think it had a lot of trouble trying to balance a lot of thematical storylines in here, and it just felt a bit more clunky than the first two. Tom Hardy is fantastic. He does fall into a bit of his what I call Tom Hardyisms, which is and just mumbling a lot. You can't really understand what he's saying, but it's still good. It's still a good ending to the character. I just wish there was a couple things that worked a bit more. Speaking of characters, Deadpool. I can't believe this movie happened still. I remember when I first saw that leaked footage that came out, which Ryan Reynolds absolutely leaked. I was just thinking, there's no way they're going to make this. There's no way, especially for an audience. How would this attract an audience? And it was made, and it did. I had to actually sneak into this movie because I wasn't of age yet. I believe it was my birthday, was in a couple days, and that would have put me at the age of it. But they wouldn't let me in, so we had to actually buy tickets for a different movie along with buying tickets for this movie, and we got the one ticket scans, and then we ran into it's a whole thing. But yeah, Deadpool, just such a funny movie, man. Just such a funny movie that really just pokes fun of itself. It's cliched. It knows it's cliched, and I think that's where a lot of the fun comes with it. And Ryan Reynolds was born to play this character. He's absolutely born to play this character, and I can't wait to see him in the MCU when they eventually bring them to MCU. Not nearly as good. Deadpool 2. Same problems that I kind of have with The Dark Knight Rises. I feel like it tried to balance a lot of more things in it. Cable's great. Domino is great. They're great characters, that addition. But I think the balancing the story of the kid and the Juggernaut, not all of it worked. There's a couple of jokes in here that kind of didn't age well. And that says something when the original has aged a lot better than this one. And this only came out, I think, 3 years ago. 3 years, that's crazy. But yeah, it's good. The super duper extended version's not good though. If you're gonna watch one version of it, watch the original. This is gonna piss off a lot of people. Die Hard. I've seen half of this movie, and that was this Christmas. The last 2 years in a row, I've been trying to watch this. The year before, I just couldn't find time to find it. This year, I fell asleep watching this one halfway through. So next Christmas, I'm gonna fully finish this one. But what I did see for the first half of it, it was good. It was very good. Very good. I understand the hype around it. All right, so that's the first two stacks I got here. Next up, Doctor Sleep. I don't know why people don't like this movie. I really don't. I still stand by that this is the most underrated movie of last year, by far. Mike Flanagan, what he was able to do with this movie and how he was able to just transform, not just transform, he was able to mix a book that was based off of the original book and a movie that was not really based off the book and blend the two worlds together to create this and for it to work the way it did is just phenomenal. Um, Ewan McGregor is great in this movie. So is Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat. She gives such a great performance in this movie. And man, I need to rewatch this one again. I love this for the first time, and I can't wait to check out the director's cut. I've heard so many good things about the director's cut, but I feel like people are being a bit too harsh on it because of The Shining, and a lot of people have such a connection to The Shining. I don't have as big of a connection. I saw it for the first time, like I mentioned, 2 years ago when I was doing my Kubrick binge, and it's fantastic. I love The Shining, but Doctor Sleep, man, so good. People need to watch it. More people need to watch that movie. Next up I got is Django Unchained. So I actually haven't seen a lot of Tarantino movies. Oh, I hadn't seen a lot of Tarantino movies until Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I went on a nice binge of all of Tarantino's movies, and this is probably my second favorite that he's done. Um, Such a fun movie, man. All of them involved in this movie. Christoph Waltz, I fell in love with Christoph Waltz in this movie. I actually saw Inglourious Basterds, I think, a couple days before that, but this is the movie that Christoph Waltz was just so likable in this movie and just so funny, and even Leonardo DiCaprio so menacing, and he didn't even get nominated, which is such a travesty, but just such a fun Western movie. And I don't even love Westerns that much, but this is at the top, near the top of my list for Westerns, for sure. Next up we got is Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. So I remember when this movie came out, there was a lot of not mixed reactions, but some people were on the fence of the lack of character development that it had, and just they thought that it wasn't really a good storytelling movie. And I kind of disagree with everyone. I think that's really the point. You're not supposed to connect with any of these characters. You're kind of just thrusted into the situation between these three stories, and you're just watching it. And just on a technical level alone, this is such a masterpiece, and such a technical achievement at what it does, that I don't really understand why more people didn't love it, and especially with all the love for 1917 that came out last year. So this, I'd say, it's a better movie, and I don't, don't at me at that. It's just, I don't know. There's something about this movie. Maybe it's Nolan's filmmaking that I just love. That I think this is just such a better all around movie. I wish I saw that one in theaters. I really do. Next up, I got one of my favorite underrated movies. I'd say this is probably in the top five for my favorite movies that not a lot of people love. Not I love, but don't give enough attention to. Live, Die, Repeat, or Edge of Tomorrow. Man, this put Tom Cruise in this. Introduced me to the world of Tom Cruise. I've never seen a Mission Impossible movie before this. When I saw this movie, I was blown away at what they did. It's basically Groundhog Day, but so science fiction, and it is just such a fun time, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. And it could have been really bad, but with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, they give two great performances. And even the filmmaking, Doug Liman created a really good movie that I've been wanting a sequel for years, and they've said it's been in production. I don't think it's going to come out, but if it does, I'm going to be there day one. I love Edge of Tomorrow. I want to see this movie again so badly. It's a fantastic movie. Next up we got is Villeneuve's Enemy. I'd say Enemy is probably on around the lower end of his filmography, but it's still a fantastic movie. Jake Gyllenhaal is one of my favorite actors, and I think he's able just to portray both these characters so well, and it wouldn't have worked if he wasn't as strong of an actor as he was. Um, as I was saying about Morally Compromised Men, this is a prime example of that one. It's just a lot of questions with this movie that I don't even really have the answer to, and I'm sure you're not supposed to have the answer to. But yeah, Enemy, great movie. Next up we got is Fantastic Mr. Fox, and actually my other criterion, the only other criterion I have. So I'm not the biggest Wes Anderson I'm not a film of his biggest fan, but I think that Fantastic Mr. Fox is a masterpiece on all levels. Just the script is so funny and so heartwarming, and just the animation is so gorgeous. And I think this is probably top 3 animated movies of all time, just purely off animation. The stop motion is gorgeous. It's got such a warm, vibrant, heartwarming film in general. Like, it's such a good looking movie, and it's short. You can easily digest this in 90 minutes and feel good about yourself. And this is a definite watch every time it comes to fall from now on. Next up I got is First Man. Damien Chazelle is probably one of my favorite filmmakers at the moment. I didn't love First Man as much as his other movies, but First Man I think is a really good character study on Neil Armstrong. And Ryan Gosling gives a really powerful performance, and so does Claire Foy. They're all really good in this movie, and like I said, it's a lot different from Chazelle's other filmographies, and it takes music. I actually did a paper on this, so it looks at music very differently, whereas Whiplash and La La Land looks at music more direct on and how it connects to characters. This more uses it to build a tension filled, you know, make it more tension filled. I don't know. I'm losing my mind. I've spoken for I think 30 minutes straight now. It's First Man, good movie. I need to give this one another watch. I watched in IMAX. Those moon scenes, they're great. Next up, Ford versus Ferrari. Again, one of the more underrated movies of last year. It's the ultimate dad film. I saw this at TIFF, and it was really one of the only galas that I got tickets for that weren't sold out. And there wasn't a lot of hype compared to Joker and Knives Out and those movies that were all playing. And I'm so happy I got to see this movie. And I told everyone as soon as I saw it, like, you need to go see this in theaters. This, along with, like, it's a technical masterpiece with sound and editing. It deserved those wins at the Oscar, in my opinion. And really good performances by Bale and Damon. Damon, this is a good comeback movie for him. He hasn't really done anything the last couple of years. And James Mangold, one of the most underrated directors of our time, I would say, probably. Next up I got is Full Metal Jacket. So I haven't finished my Kubrick binge. I've kind of stopped because I felt kind of burnt out of watching all his movies. So this is on my list to watch. Love war movies. So that's a definite watch soon. Next up, we got one of my favorite movies of last decade, Get Out. So I'm a huge horror fan, and this to me is just such a beautiful and such a funny movie and smartly written. Jordan Peele really pushes himself as just this horror director that came, no, you wouldn't expect it from what he was doing with Key and Peele, and just to come out and make this movie with such a powerful performance with Daniel Kaluuya and brilliant story. It's one of my favorite screenplays of the last decade. I could go on for days about this, but I'm kind of losing my voice right now. So Get Out, you've all seen Get Out. I don't know. I don't have to say much more about it. However, one movie I will say much more about is The Gift. Again, this is a top 5 underrated movie for me. Joel Edgerton, what he's able to do in this movie, man, the tension that is built up in this movie, very similar to The Invisible Man, I'd say, in a lot of scenes. But just a lot of tension where you wouldn't expect tension to be built. And it uses horror in such an unconventional way that it builds this story. And then when it gets to the end of the film, you're literally grasping your seat because you're so, like, anxious watching this movie. And Jason Bateman, man, this is the movie that introduced me to Jason Bateman as a serious actor, and I think to a lot of people, and I'm happy he took that step, especially with Ozark. He is such a fantastic serious actor, and this to me is his best movie. If you haven't seen The Gift, please go watch this. This is such a good movie. Rounding out this section is Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I'll pair the two together because they're very similar. Movies that absolutely should not work. No way they should have worked. There is a lot of, not controversy, but a lot of worry inside the MCU fandom when they announced that they were going to be adapting these two movies, or these characters into these movies, because they shouldn't work. They are such a mismatched gang of characters that it shouldn't work. And James Gunn is able to helm them and make them their own and make them some of my favorite characters in the MCU. Volume 2 is not nearly as good as the first one. The first one I'd say is leaps and bounds better. But both films are just such a fun movie and make me not question the MCU anymore. From that point on, I was on board for everything the MCU did. And I think that Guardians is probably, the first one is probably one of my favorite movies in the MCU. Volume 2 not as good, but I'm excited for Volumes 3 and the future of those characters. All right, so that was the first shelf done, and I'm going to try to get this whole next bunch done in one, and you'll understand why. It is the entire Harry Potter trilogy, saga, 8 movies. Obviously, I grew up watching Harry Potter like everyone else, probably. The first movie, not my favorite. The second movie, I love. The third movie, obviously, is the best one. Alfonso Cuarón, what he's able to do with just the world and everything like that, really make it such a nice turning point for the franchise. The fourth one's great, really good. Fifth one, I'm not a huge fan of. Neither am I. The sixth. I find after the fourth one, it kind of goes downhill a little bit. Not really downhill in quality, just it's not they could have done so much more and they didn't. Deathly Hallows Part 1, same thing. Not a huge fan. Part 2 is obviously great. It's a great ending to this franchise. And really redeemed it and solidified it as one of the defining trilogy. Why do I keep saying trilogies? It's not a trilogy. One of the defining sagas of my time. Next up I got is one of my favorite horror movies, Hereditary. When I first saw this in theaters, man, it was just such a weird experience. Everyone was just on the edge of their seats, not knowing what was going to happen next. And A24, this put A24 in the spotlight for me, and just really such a weirdly tense and scary film with a powerful performance from Toni Collette. Her best performance, one of my favorite horror performances. And Ari Aster, man, he is some crazy director. The fact that he's able to make this and his next film, which we'll get to in a little bit, in the span of a year, kind of insane. Great film. And next one I'll go off of the same ones is How to Train Your Dragon, the trilogy. Another defining childhood trilogy for me. Just such a nice story about, it's kind of like the dog and his owner story, but it's done with dragons, and it's really touching story. Yeah, it's one of my favorite trilogies of all time. They always came out in a point in my life where I needed one to come out, and they're really good films for me to fall back on and to just relax. And I need those sometimes every once in a while. And honestly, with what's going on in the world right now, might do a binge of this trilogy. Could do me so good. Next up, another feel good movie. That's one of my favorite Pixar movies, The Incredibles. I need this on Blu-ray. I don't know why I don't have it on Blu-ray yet. Fantastic film. Brad Bird, his vision for this thing is just insane, and it's kind of mature for its attended audience, and it's one that it holds up better each time you watch it. Just some classic memorable lines in there. Honey, where's my super suit? Great characters, everything around. I don't have the sequel. I did like it. I didn't love it as much as the first one, but I should probably grab that on Blu-ray eventually someday. Next up, also something I need on Blu-ray, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't have the other three. I don't want the fourth one, but I want the other two. Man, these are some great movies, some fantastic movies. I would say Indy is better than Han Solo. That might be controversial, but Raiders of the Lost Ark is just such a fun movie that I haven't really seen in a while. That one's definitely needs a rewatch. Next up is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, Inglourious Basterds. This to me has such a different feel than a lot of his movies, and it's just so funny, man. Like, it's Brad Pitt in this movie. Wow. Everyone talks about how good he was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's even better in this one. He's just so funny. That Buongiorno line, just great. The 3 hours flies by. I love that movie. I want to rewatch it soon. Next up, It Chapter 1. I don't have It Chapter 2 because the more I thought about It Chapter 2, the more I disliked it. This really encapsulated everything in 2017 that was taking off. So Stranger Things, just in general, everything with that. It's just such a nice horror movie. That's very doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's pretty good. I wasn't expecting anything with this coming out, and everyone talks about the original miniseries, how much the first half is better than the second half. I see that now because they tried to adapt it way too similar for Chapter 2, but the cast is stellar. Bill Skarsgård is insane in this movie. It's got some nice direction in there too. Just an overall really solid horror movie that a lot of people have come to sour on recently, and I rewatched this before at Chapter 2, and I think it holds up great. Next up is Inception, another Christopher Nolan movie that I missed in theaters. I was really young when it came out, but there's not much more I can say to this movie than what's already been said. Great performances, great direction, great ending. The top sequence, all of it. It's great. It's fantastic. I'm gonna need to rewatch all of Nolan's movies before Tenet comes out, if Tenet comes out. Next up, no one talks about this movie, Insidious Chapter 2. For me, 5. I could probably even make a list of 5 in this movie alone of movies. A lot of them are horror and thriller movies. Insidious Chapter 2 is the best in the Insidious franchise, and James Wan, people don't talk about James Wan that much. This is the movie that pushed horror into a completely different light for me. I was just so mind blown by what they did in this movie and the time travel aspects. Not really time travel, but just I don't want to give too much away, but just the things that he does in this movie are so crazy, just so crazy that it's people don't talk about it. People need to talk about this movie more. As for the Insidious franchise as a whole, Insidious 1's great. Insidious 2, obviously my favorite of the three. 3 is pretty good. Lee Winnell's gives a good directional thing for it. It's not great. And then 4 I haven't seen because I heard it's terrible. I'm sure I'm going to get to it eventually, but this is my favorite of the Insidious bunch. And if you are a fan of James Wan and what he did with The Conjurings, which I don't actually have and I should probably pick up eventually, please check that one out. Going off back to the MCU again, Iron Man. The only Iron Man I have because Iron Man 2 sucks and Iron Man 3 is not great. This is just a great standalone movie as its own for what it did for the MCU 2008 and just catapulting it into what it became today. Robert Downey Jr., we all know the story, how this was basically his rise back into Hollywood. He is the personification of Tony Stark and just a really good story. One of my favorites of the MCU. Next up, we have a very underrated Quentin Tarantino, Jackie Brown. I saw this on a flight, actually, and man, I was just surprised by how fun this movie was, too. I feel like that's the thing that's with Tarantino, it's just fun. But I'm kind of mixed on Tarantino a little bit, but this, I would say, is definitely in his upper echelon. It's got a great performance by Samuel Jackson, just a really fun story, and I understand why people don't love it as much, maybe, because it's kind of an anomaly in his filmography and it's very different from everything he does. However, I would argue that's Death Proof to me because I can't stand Death Proof. But yeah, Jackie Brown, great movie. Moving next along is John Wick Chapter 1, and I guess I'll do John Wick Chapter 2 at the same time. Don't have 3 yet, but Keanu Reeves, how can you not love Keanu? He's basically a meme at this point. Not even a meme, everyone just loves Keanu. And these movies are so fun for a ridiculous premise that they do in the first one of him killing his dog being killed and him going out for revenge, to the world building that they do in the second to build this Continental and that the assassin world in general. It's just so fun and so interesting to listen to and to explore. I think John Wick Chapter 3, well, I haven't rewatched it since I saw it in theaters. It's not as good as the first two, but I love the character building that it did. There is a lot of stupid decisions in that movie, though. They kind of render the whole first half a little pointless, and it probably doesn't hold up too well on rewatches, but there are some really good scenes in there. And if any movie that has Boban in it, hey, that's just immediately a good movie. Rest in peace, NBA. Next up, speaking of other Jokers, what I was talking about earlier, Joker. Controversial movie of 2019, and I'm on the side that I love this movie. I've seen it twice now. The second time, I think it didn't hold up nearly as well as the first time, just because of the hysteria that was going around with Joker. Made for such a unique and kind of terrifying movie theater experience, even though really should have known that nothing wasn't going to happen. But yeah, Joaquin Phoenix kills it in this movie. He just encapsulates this character, and it makes it so different than what Heath Ledger did for it, and that's why you kind of can't compare the two Jokers. They're just so different on their own level. They're both great. They both deserve the acclaim that they got. Now, it is a bit similar to other Scorsese movies. I get that, but I don't care, man. It's such a fun time. Not even that fun. It's kind of depressing, honestly. So continuing right along, we got Jurassic Park. Again, quintessential blockbuster. The special effects still hold up pretty well today. As for the rest of the franchise, I don't have any other ones. I enjoy the second one. The third one's not great. The Jurassic World's okay, and then I don't want to talk about Fallen Kingdom. Fallen Kingdom's awful, but a great dinosaur film. Next up, I'll do both of these at once. Kill Bill 1 and 2. So I like Kill Bill 1. I'm a pretty good fan of it. Kill Bill 2, it's okay. This is kind of what I mean by I'm kind of up and down on Tarantino. I can take it or leave it. I binged both of them in one day for the first time. And yeah, they're okay. I don't know if I want to fully revisit them into the future. I'm sure I will at one point. But yeah, Kill Bill 1 for now is my favorite of the two. Next up I got is something I have to get on Blu-ray soon. Kingsman: The Secret Service. It was a movie I was blown away with when I first saw it in theaters. Just was expecting nothing from it, and I got a really solid, fun action flick. It's introduced Taron Egerton to the world, who is a great actor in my opinion. Colin Firth is hilarious in this movie, and this scene in the church, It's tremendous. I haven't seen the second one. I know the third one is coming out sometime this year, so I'm excited for that one. That does come out, as it looks pretty interesting. Next out is my favorite movie of last year, and when I also got to see it TIFF as my last screening. Knives Out. Ryan Johnson comeback film. Is it really a comeback film? The Last Jedi was just so controversial that everyone thought Ryan Johnson sucked, and he made this, and now everyone loves him again. Just such a funny whodunit that really pokes fun at whodunits, and it subverts a lot of expectations with whodunits, and this is how you do it correctly. Um, and yeah, Daniel Craig's accent, the donut holes, and Ana de Armas is great in this movie. Just such a fun movie. It's just a fun ensemble. I've seen it twice now. The atmosphere at TIFF when I did see it, it's unlike nothing I've ever been in before. Just a roaring theater. It's hilarious. Something next up that I do actually have a disservice for having on DVD and on Blu-ray. Kubo and the Two Strings. When I saw this movie for the first time, I was literally blown away by the animation. One of the most gorgeously animated films. Some of the set designs that they do with the sculptures and just the story and all of it is just so good and so wholesome and so beautifully done. Leica, I haven't seen any of their other films, but this was a beautiful introduction to Leica, and I think I'm gonna be doing a Leica binge soon. Next up is one of my favorite movies of all time, and we got La La Land. So I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with this movie. So I first saw it, and it was when the hype was as real as it could be during February, just before the Oscars. I saw this in theaters, and I thought it was okay. I thought that the direction was great, cinematography was great, the songs were good, and the actors were obviously good. But I just felt like there was something missing. The ending really left a sour taste in my mouth. Second time I saw it, hated it. Like straight up, did not like it at all. And then for some reason, I gave it a third try, and I fell in love with it. I don't know what it took. Maybe all it took was for me to look at it with a more mature lens and more of like a filmic knowledge than I did. But just everything about this movie is so beautiful and so ambiguous, and just a love letter to everything that was great about the old Hollywood films. It has one of my favorite directors and my two favorite actors in it. So I don't know how I wouldn't have loved it to begin with, but yeah, this is a movie that I could watch. I think I've seen 6 times now. I'm just, yeah, I love this movie. Next up is the Lego Movie. A hit for sure. A surprise hit. No one thought this movie was going to be good. Absolutely no one. And it was. To everyone's surprise. A lot of that has to do with Phil Lord and Chris Miller. They're a great screenwriting duo. That this could have easily have been just straight product placement the whole time, and it is, but they poke fun at it, and it just a movie about Legos, and it shouldn't work. And they intertwine human aspects into it, like human scenes. It just shouldn't work. But this helped, along with Jurassic World, putting Chris Pratt into the spotlight. That came out in 2014. Oh man. Next up, another one of my favorite movies of last year is The Lighthouse. I don't know what to say about this movie. It's just so bizarre and so weird, but these two captured the screen and the essence of the film so wonderfully. And Robert Eggers, his filmic style for it is just so weird, but just so beautiful at the same time. And there's a lot of different ways you can interpret this movie, and that's what I love about it. Yeah, I love showing it to people and seeing their reactions for the first time and just them being like, what the hell is this? It's great. If you haven't checked out The Lighthouse, if you're a horror fan, this is a must watch. 824 again, coming in. And next up we have my favorite animated movie under the Disney Renaissance era, not Renaissance, under the Disney era of the 90s, 80s, that era. The Lion King. I can't say anything else about this movie. It's just the perfect kids movie. Hated the remake that they did last year. Just thought it sucked the life out of everything this movie had. So if I eventually have kids one day, they're not going to know that version exists and that this is the only one that they get to see. Next up, we have Logan. There's a lot of different ways that you could go about making this character's ending, and This was not the way that I thought they were going to go, but it's the perfect way for them to go. Just a mature look at this character, this run down, beaten man, and a character that we've known for 16 years of Hugh Jackman, his rise with this character, and ultimately his end for this character is just such a beautiful, beautiful end. And I haven't given this movie enough love that I should. I haven't seen it. I think I've only seen this once, and it's about time I give this another rewatch because it's just such a mature ending to this film and the characters that we all love from the X-Men universe, and it's by far the best of the X-Men movies. Next up we got is Looper, another Rian Johnson film that actually introduced me to Rian Johnson. Just a fun sci-fi movie that really takes time travel to a different way and subverts expectations with the genre. And Bruce Willis, his best movies since forever. Just a great science fiction movie. Move up the next pile over here. Next up we got is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So I have actually, until 2 years ago, never seen any of them fully. I've seen the first one. I think I've seen the first one through as a kid. I think twice. And then I didn't finish the other two. So I finally was able to sit down with my girlfriend and we binged all three in one day. And they're great. I don't know what else I could say about these movies that also haven't been said. They're just a fantastic fantasy films. And usually I'm not a huge fan of fantasy films, but they're classics for a reason. The effects still hold up very well, especially compared to The Hobbit and the overuse of CGI that they did. Funny, I saw The Hobbit, all three of them, before I saw Lord of the Rings. I don't know how I let that happen, but Lord of the Rings, yeah, they're classics. Next up, another classic in my book, Mad Max Fury Road. One of the best of the decades last year. The practical effects used in this film are mind-blowing. Tom Hardy does his Tom Hardyisms. You can't not love it. Charlize Theron, that really introduced me to her too. I've never really seen much of her, but she's fantastic as Furiosa. I really want them to do a Furiosa film. It's been rumored for a while, but hasn't happened yet. Hope that does happen sometime soon. Memento. If you haven't seen Memento, you suck. That's all I'm gonna say. Watch Memento. I'm not gonna spoil anything about Memento. It's one of my favorite Nolan movies. Next up, Ari Aster's sequel, follow up to Midsummer. Ari Aster. Let's try that again. Ari Aster's follow up to Hereditary. There we go. Midsummer. It's really also helped launch Florence Pugh into what she is already in just 1 year. The year she had last year is absolutely incredible. I think this is a lot more of a slower film than Hereditary is. Hereditary is definitely slow, but this forces you into such an uncomfortable position. And sure, it's kind of formulaic at points. I think that's the point of it. And just, man, it's such a weird movie. Also, a very weird theater experience that I had there. Everyone looking around at each other like, what the hell are we watching? I need to give that one another rewatch too. Next up, I'll do both these. The Mission Impossible franchise. As I mentioned earlier, I never really watched Mission Impossible until I saw Edge of Tomorrow. So then I started watching the other ones. I've seen 3, 4, 5, and 6. I've not seen 1 and 2 yet. 3 is good. 4 is fantastic. 5 is good. And then 6 is one of my favorite action movies. I saw that in IMAX too. I was lucky enough to see that in IMAX. And they're just movies that get better as they go on. I don't know how. And just the stunts, they're just crazy. Next up, I got Neighbors. Good movie. Good comedy movie. Zac Efron and Seth Rogen have good chemistry with each other. Yeah, it's just a fun movie. Next up, I got is The Nice Guys. This is one that I need to rewatch. Quite possibly Ryan Gosling's funniest performance that he's had. And Russell Crowe too. I'm not a huge Russell Crowe fan, but he's great. And this is my only Shane Black film that I really love. Such a nice buddy cop film. And one that not a lot of people give enough credit that it should be. Another film that the Academy didn't give any credit to was Nightcrawler. Jake Gyllenhaal's best performance, in my opinion. He captures Lou Bum and just transforms. You don't even recognize the man in this movie. Such a good thriller. Next up, I haven't taken this out of the packaging yet because it's brand new. Oculus. So when I go back and talk about underrated films that not a lot of people talk about, Mike Flanagan This is the film that actually got me into horror. I was never a horror fan until I watched Oculus. And the things that Flanagan's able to do in this movie just blew me away. So I'll always have a soft spot for this movie. It's not, I give it a lot of high of a grade because I love it as much. I'm sure other people won't love it as much as me, but this holds such a nostalgic place in my heart that I love this movie. And this is up there for one of my favorite horror movies. Next up, I'm going to go bit quicker on some of these. Pacific Rim. Not a huge fan of Pacific Rim. Guillermo del Toro. He's kind of up and down for me as a director. He's a great guy. I love the guy. I've seen him in interviews and everything like that. But something about Pacific Rim didn't stick well. The visuals are great, though. Next up, the most wholesome movie in the world, Paddington 2. Also need this on Blu-ray. If you haven't seen Paddington, what are you doing? This is the type of movie you need to be watching right now. I love Paddington. Also, Guillermo del Toro again, Pan's Labyrinth. This is his best movie that he has made. Yeah, it's fantastic. Next up, one of my favorite trilogies, the Planet of the Apes trilogy. It's kind of funny how this became one of my favorite trilogies. I didn't love Rise when I first saw it for the first time, and then Dawn came out and really, really just blew me away. Especially with some of like the effects that they do and the motion capture, and Andy Serkis's performance as Caesar is just so beautiful. And a lot of people don't like War. I love War. I think War is a perfect ending to this character. And they are apparently doing a fourth one. I don't know how that's going to work, especially with Matt Reeves not returning, is part of the reason these work so well. So we'll find out, I guess. I'm not really overexcited about that, but we shall see. Next up is Prisoners. Villeneuve, again, with the slow torture thrillers that he does, and just again, Jake Gyllenhaal is one of his best performances, but this is also one of Hugh Jackman's best performances, and just this is a depressing movie, man. Like you have to be in the mood to watch this type of thing. I think that's part of the reason I haven't went back and rewatched this yet, is because I'm so nervous to rewatch it because it made me so depressed watching it. I also saw it as a kid, which probably shouldn't have been watching as a kid when I was younger when this came out. But man, it's so good. It's such a good movie. Next up, also one of my favorite Christopher Nolan movies, The Prestige. I knew nothing about this movie going in, and my God, was I blown away. Fantastic performance from Christian Bale. Scarlett Johansson's really good in this, so is Hugh Jackman, and it's just a nice movie about magic that you don't know where it's going to go. If you think you know where this is going, you have no idea. So good. Next up, I'm gonna trigger a lot of people. Pulp Fiction. You must have this as a film major. The thing is, for me, I don't love Pulp Fiction. It's good. I understand why it has garnered such acclaim from a lot of people. I just think it's been done better. Obviously, I appreciate it for what it's done in film history, but I just didn't resonate with this much. Maybe it's just because I don't love Tarantino as a lot of other people do. But I don't know. And I was out of order. I should have had this one first, but Parasite. Just picked this one up for my birthday actually a couple of weeks ago, and the more I thought about Parasite, the more I loved this movie, and just it's winning Best Picture and all the awards it did, Best Director, Best Screenplay. It deserved all of them. It's one of the best screenplays I've ever seen in a film. The direction is some of the tightest direction I've ever seen. It's the best made film of last year. It's not my favorite. It's up there. It's top 3 for sure. But it's definitely the best made movie. And just I went on a nice Bong Joon-ho marathon after this, and his movies are fantastic. I'm glad that everyone agrees how good this movie is, and hopefully this starts a renaissance of people starting to accept and look up more foreign films, because it'd be good for everything. Also, at the time of recording this, I just found out that A Quiet Place is delayed. I love A Quiet Place. I think it is a fantastic horror movie, and also created a nice theatrical theater experience that I haven't had really since. John Krasinski just does a fantastic job with the direction. Emily Blunt, a great performance, and I'm very, very bummed that this is not coming out next week, because I was fully prepared to go and watch this again and then go watch the sequel, and I've heard great things about the sequel, and yep. Yeah, that that sucks. That's my second shelf done. I'm gonna go grab my third shelf and be back in a second. Okay, we have reached the end, or around the end of this video. I have no idea how long this is going to be, but in actuality, it's been 3 hours for me, around there, with all the breaks I'm taking. So, I'm going to try to semi-rapid fire through these because I'm tired and I want to take a nap. So, first off, Ratatouille. This was a childhood movie for me growing up. Again, Brad Bird with Pixar is just magic in general. I rewatched this actually on New Year's Eve, or I think New Year's Day. Fantastic, holds up well. Music is actually really good in that movie too. Another one that's going to be a bit controversial. Reservoir Dogs. I think it's a bit overrated. Again, as I've mentioned many times, I just don't think Tarantino's all that much for me. After that, I got The Revenant. I've actually seen this. Every time I've tried to see this, something bad has happened to me. So I watched this recently. Hope that has nothing to do with anything that's happening. It's good. It's a good movie. The cinematography is absolutely astounding, and the bear scene is just it's incredible what they were able to do. I don't think that Leo should have won for this movie. I do think it was a pity Oscar. Tom Hardy is so much better in this movie, but Leo still goes through a great physical toll in this movie, and it's good to check out on the one view. I'm not sure if I'm going to rewatch it again. I just have it just in case I feel like putting it on. Next up, I got all the Rocky movies. Like I mentioned earlier, I haven't actually watched a lot of these. I'm going to do a marathon of these eventually soon. And next up, I got The Shining. Yeah, the quintessential horror movie. Jack Nicholson's fantastic in this movie. Kubrick does something very special with this, and I know Stephen King doesn't like it, but you know what, Stephen King, you're the only one that doesn't like it. So, great movie. Next up, we got the Sicario. I loved this movie when I first saw this in theaters. It's such a good movie. I can just burn in my head the one scene of the night vision, burn in my head, and just the twists that this movie takes, and the stunning turns. It's just it's an incredible achievement, and sequel did not live up to that at all, and I was thoroughly disappointed by it, and I hope they don't make that third one. Next up is a movie that I'm not disappointed by. Is the Simpsons movie. I'm not the biggest Simpsons fan in the world. I did like the Simpsons as a kid, but the movie is just great. It's I don't know how it was able to do a good movie, but it's really it's got a lot of political commentary in there that's actually pretty relevant, especially at the moment. Keep mentioning that. It's good. It's a really good movie, and I would not be opposed if they made a second one. However, I think the time has passed at that point. I think The Simpsons is a little past its point for about 12 years now, and the fact that they're bringing shorts now in front of Pixar movies, don't know if I'm a huge fan of that. Movies that I am a fan of: the Spider-Man trilogy, Sam Raimi's take on the Spider-Man, the character, my favorite character in all superheroes. I don't think I mentioned that so far. Yeah, Spider-Man's my favorite superhero. So Spider-Man 1 was just a dream to watch, and Spider-Man 2 is still one of the best movies, superhero movies that have been made. Spider-Man 3, however, it's clear that there was a lot of studio interference with that movie. So I still have fun with it when I watch it, but it's not good. Like, it's not good. It's the only trilogy that I have fully because the Amazing Spider-Man movies are not good. And while I think Tobey is the best Peter Parker that we've had, I think Andrew Garfield is the best Spider-Man that we had, but not the opposite way around. To mix both of them to make the perfect Spider-Man that we had is Tom Holland. So Spider-Man Homecoming is just everything that I wanted to see in Spider-Man in a live-action take. He has the quips of Spider-Man, he has the awkwardness and the geekiness of Peter Parker, and he's a kid. So it works out perfectly for the character, and having Iron Man in it, but it doesn't overshadow from what he's able to do, is just it's good. It's a very good step for the MCU, and a movie that it was a bit wild throughout the summer was Spider-Man: Far From Home, when all the controversy happened when Sony and Disney pulled out of their agreement. And I never wanted to watch this movie again because I would have just been depressed with everything this movie set up, because the ending of this movie is insane and set up something that would have been so fantastic for the MCU. And I'm very happy that they are going to continue with that. J.K. Simmons shows up. Yeah, that's awesome. Jake Gyllenhaal is fantastic in this movie. You knew the Mysterio twist was coming, but it didn't detract from the movie, and it actually made it kind of interesting with what they decided to pick with it. However, none of those are my favorite Spider-Man movie. This is my favorite Spider-Man movie. I actually rewatched this yesterday at the time of this recording. Um, it's I wish I had this growing up because this is literally everything I want in a Spider-Man movie. It's funny, it's charming, it encapsulates everything what it means to be Spider-Man and that anyone can be the man behind the mask, and it does a really good job at focusing about that, and just to balance all of these weird things in this movie and for it to still be good, it blows my mind. The animation is gorgeous, and I'm excited for the sequel, yet kind of a little nervous. A movie that I haven't gone back and rewatched, but I really need to, is A Star Is Born. Um, this is one of my favorite movies of 2018, and Lady Gaga is just fantastic. And I don't know how she was able to be such a good actress, but she was. Bradley Cooper is fantastic in this movie. His direction is really good too. Um, yeah, it's a good remake. I actually watched one of the older versions of this for a paper. Bad, real bad. I'm excited to go back and rewatch that one. Um, Another movie that's fantastic is the Star Trek from 2009. It's yeah, it just took the original source material and just played with it and had fun with it. And the sequels never lived up to as good as this one was. But Zachary Quinto is such a good Spock, and James T. Kirk is fantastically played by Chris Pine. And I'm sad that we're not going to see the Quentin Tarantino version because that would be weird, and I want to see that. But we are getting it with the screenwriter of Fargo and the guy who did Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which I saw at TIFF, which is not good. So I'm a little nervous about that. But anyways, Star Wars: The Force Awakens. This is the only Star Wars movie I have. I'm trying to get a way to get to the originals on Blu-ray through that one version of that was fan-made content. I'm going to get those. I don't have The Last Jedi yet. And I don't think I'm going to get The Rise of Skywalker. Just a very flawed trilogy. The first one, I loved The Force Awakens, and I just think they didn't really have a plan, and it kind of messed them up in the long run. Yeah, it's disappointing what this franchise became, and the fatigue on Star Wars is very much there. Good thing The Mandalorian is there to try to boost it up a bit. Step Brothers, I've talked about this in Anchorman. I love this type of Will Ferrell. This is prime Will Ferrell, and this is prime Will Ferrell movie for me. Another prime movie is super bad. It's just a stupid comedy that actually has a lot of heart in it, and some really good performances from a lot of people. There's a lot of people in this movie that you don't really think of until you think about it, and I just love Superbad. It's such a funny movie. Super 8. You know what? J.J. Abrams gets a lot of flack as a director for being too studio, but I think he did such a great job with Super 8. It's a very, again, Stranger Things like film that it's just a very interesting watch. I didn't love it the second time as much, but it is still a really fun film to watch every once in a while. Another fun film to watch is This Is Spinal Tap. The first mockumentary is just so stupid. It's so entertaining, though. I'm glad I finally got a chance to watch that one last year. And next, I got Toy Story 4. I don't have the first three Toy Stories, unfortunately, not yet. At least I'm going to plan to get them on 4K. But I was nervous about this one, as much as anyone who is a Toy Story fan. And I grew up with Toy Story, and was just as skeptical as anyone else about the fourth one, and I'm so happy it delivered. It's not a necessary film, but I don't think they would have made it if they didn't have another story to tell with it, and they did. And Woody's closure on this story is just, it's heartbreaking, but it's heartwarming at the same time. And Toy Story 4 certainly delivered. Next up we have is Us. You know what? This has kind of become a polarizing film. I never really understood it why when I first saw it. I haven't seen it since I saw it in theaters, and probably have to check it out again. But I liked it when I saw it in theaters. I thought it was great, and I thought the end reveal was really good. Sure, it explains a bit too much. I know a lot of people don't like that, and some of it doesn't really make sense, but hey, I thought it was good. Next up we got is We're the Millers, another stupid comedy that I really enjoy. And a lot of people think I look like Kenny, so that's mainly the reason I have that. Next up is Whiplash, another one of my favorite movies. Damien Chazelle just pushes them into the spotlight in this one. And J.K. Simmons is so transformative in this movie and transcendent and just everything. And I'm so happy this movie exists. It's so good. Next up, I got is the original X-Men trilogy on Blu-ray. The first X-Men's great, second X-Men is fantastic, and the third one is horrible. After that, we got X-Men First Class, and that's the only one I actually have of the quadrilogy that they did. First Class is fantastic, as is Days of Future Past, which I still need to get. Apocalypse is kind of hit and miss. It feels a little bit lifeless, but not as lifeless as Dark Phoenix. Oh man, that movie's not good. Next up I have is Zodiac. We're actually coming closer to the end of this. I have not watched this yet. I am preparing to do a David Fincher marathon. I've only seen 3 of his movies. I've seen The Social Network, I've seen Seven, and I've seen Fight Club. So I'm planning on finishing off all of those before Mank comes out later this year. Next up I have another underrated movie that I love, 10 Cloverfield Lane. It takes everything that the first one did and just completely flips it on its head. And I was so amped at the possibility of a Cloverfield universe that is all different movies in one. And I think that they should have kept Overlord in there because Overlord is a great movie. But this is something claustrophobic. John Goodman is fantastic in this movie, and it is just such a thrill of a movie. If you haven't seen this one, check it out. You won't be disappointed. Next up, we got, starting with the numbers, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Don't know why this one's first because there's other numbers that are shorter, but yeah, quintessential. You have to watch it. I don't know what this movie is. It's weird, but it's great. It is so great. Coming up on the final ones, 21 and 22 Jump Street. These are actually my favorite comedies. I don't know what else I can say aside from my name is Jeff. And finally, I got 42. Just a great, solid, feel-good movie. I haven't seen this in a while, and I think it's time for a rewatch. And it actually has Chadwick Boseman, which I didn't know until I picked that one up. So there you go. That's my movie collection. Obviously, it's not complete. I'm missing a lot of stuff in there, but yeah, I just thought I would make this and saw a lot of the ones on YouTube that I enjoyed, and I thought that, hey, I got a lot of movies I can contribute to that too. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, if you could give it a thumbs up, it'd probably help me out. Like I said, this is just kind of the start of the channel. It's going to take me a little bit to work out the kinks, some of the awkwardness, some of all that stuff set up. I've got one light, as you can probably tell with my glasses, shining at me, and you can probably see in the reflection. But I'm going to work this out. I'm going to try this thing and get this thing rolling. And yeah, so from now on, or for now, that's I've been Jake from Gax Reviews, and thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.